Hi everyone, my name is Eric Melton and I want to talk about men and communication. We're talking with a lot of men recently and this has been a big frustration for me personally and a lot of other guys out there that are wondering why it's so hard to communicate. And it has a big factor on our society today, and we're seeing men just retract more and more, retracting away from leadership positions. And I think I've experienced and know enough about why we do this and how we can fix it. So men are not communicating a lot these days because there's so many ways to communicate and there's so many platforms out there that men just don't have the time, and they're not always the most talkative because on the job site, sports, everything that they're encompassed with their whole entire life is always physical contact. There's always some kind of physical component for the most part. There are men out there that are doing well with communications and social media and emails, but for most men, they gravitate towards more simpler physical kind of communication. So women are dominating a lot of these platforms, and a lot of times when you have to communicate later on with your spouse or a relationship or even growing up, the men tend to go off to do the sports or the physical aspect, and women can continue to communicate. And also physically and mentally they're actually made with a higher processing power than actually men can compute. So they tend to say less words. We've heard that before, that women do 3 times as many words and gestures out throughout the day, where men can say 5,000 words in a day and women can say 20,000 words in a day. So they practice all the time. You get better at what you do, and men don't want to talk to me. They don't want to communicate. And also they're being depicted to be, to be liked, you got to be bad or you got to be funny. So that if you can't communicate very well, you go towards a simpler form of communication, which is just being a clown and not really caring what people think, or so that's what they say. And you don't actually lead or educate or help someone else out because you feel like you don't have any value unless you're making them laugh or you're completing some kind of transaction, or if it's a bad group of friends where you're drinking, getting into kinds of bad addictions, wasting time, goofing off, hanging out. Everything that men drift toward because it's the simplest and easiest way to communicate with people. They don't want to do the hard stuff because a lot of times we put our young boys in the society to not think. We always tell them to be quiet, tough it up, suck it up, go out there and just get the job done. Participate, but don't participate with your mouth. Participate physically participate. And I think that's wrong. I think that I've been a part of that society growing up. I was in sports my whole entire life. There was physical labor the whole entire time. Not necessarily to say it was bad, but I was definitely more attracted to those things. And also society doubled down on it, saying, yes, you should do more of that. But with the high communication society that we have right now, where women are communicating on all kinds of levels, like email, Facebook, Snapchat, texting, LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest, TV, and all kinds of other apps. There's millions and millions of apps, and women are dominating these spaces and the social aspects, and they have the freedom to communicate all the time. Men interact on a physical level and a transactional level every single day, which is a good thing, but we also need to, one, start teaching our boys to lead at home instead of to tell them to do all the work. We need to ask them to step up and read out loud to someone else or to walk someone else through a lesson. Take the time to slow down, get some knowledge in your brain, and then tell someone what you learned. Tell them how your day was instead of grunts and noises being acceptable. As long as they get their chores done or they show up on time, you're okay with them, but make them participate in a different way. We need to get more involved, and we need to ask men actually what they're feeling inside, because a lot of times if someone else is dominating in something and then also you're told that you're not as good, you don't measure up, and that Lucy and Susan are the very best at this and you're falling behind, you're going to gravitate toward the things that you excel at because you can get love that way. But that's not always the best thing. That we need to also step up in the home or leadership, in family, and also in our spiritual life and on our jobs, that there needs to be some places where we can grow and actually appreciate ourselves instead of with everything that's going on, all the other platforms and social media, we're feeling less and less valued, and there's less and less space for the carpenter or all the trade kind of men out there because machines are taking that over, and the people that are actually moving forward is technology and health and all these things that are really complicated, and some men just don't have the capacity to keep up, and their gifts are usually tended towards labor, and since there's no one paying attention to them, they don't really have a purpose And when you don't have a purpose, you're not growing, you're retracting, and they need a place to grow. So if communication is going to be the place that we go into the future, we need to start encompassing men into our daily lives and figuring out a way to actually make them feel better about themselves instead of making fun of them on television as the class clown, or that they're bad or they're always getting in trouble. We need to find a healthy outlet for them to actually communicate. And I think that that's something that we could work on, is getting boys more involved with their communications at an earlier age and start steering them in the right direction, start making them lead a class or teach a class to their peer groups. They need to get involved biblically, and then parents need to guide them through these lessons, and also then start making them teach and get them in the driver's seat sooner so they feel more confident, because there's too many men, even in their 50s and 60s, I've met men that are frustrated and confused, or they've been stuffing and sweeping things under the rug, and when trauma happens or death or an unborn child or a wedlock child comes into the world, or loss of a job, they don't know how to express themselves. These very difficult situations actually push them into a corner, and they usually stay there because they're terrified and they don't know how to get themselves out. They don't know how to communicate that they're hurting. They're too prideful to actually get out of these situations, and there's not as many options for them anymore because there's all these high forms of communication. So the typical man doesn't really get that far sometimes. He's stuck into a very average and very hard labor type job, and he's seeing everyone else have an easier way of life, and other women, as far as they get to stay and do all the communications, they stay in the classroom, and then later on they find out that leadership is much more easier for them because they've taught themselves how to talk it properly, and they've taught themselves all the lessons they need to learn. Meanwhile, the men are just really confused because they've lost they were born to be very different. It's a good thing, and with everything that's going on, it's just overwhelming for a lot of them, so they just shut down, because if you're not actually competing, you're like, why even try? So I'm just gonna head out and do my own thing, play some video games. I'm gonna get into a bunch of videos and hang out with my buddies, retract from relationships and business, and actually just hide out with playing mind-numbing games, or hanging out with friends, or taking a job that doesn't really push them because they're terrified of stepping up because there's so much going on and it's overwhelming to them. So men are shutting down. There's about 20 different accounts that women are on and that men aren't. They just can't manage that amount of things all at once, especially when it's dealing with communication. If it was 20 physical things, men would be all over it and they would excel. But since everything's communication nowadays and it's super complex, they just can't keep up with providing, making enough money, and supporting, and also feeling connected with other men, where they just don't have time for a lot of this stuff, where they can't learn these new skill sets that are coming about, and they're just really feeling bad about it. They don't know how to actually get themselves out of it. So we need to start showing the way. We need to start stepping up and helping these people, these men, find out like how do they get back involved and like make them feel loved and supported, even though they're not at the same levels as other people. Help them step up and grow, just like everyone has given to us time and a commitment to help them grow. So we're valuing new social media languages, we're valuing all this stuff, and men are falling behind. So we need to do a better job and help them out, because men are being crushed. They're designed to passionately live, physically live. Men are very passionate and aggressive by nature, to protect and defend and to support and do the hard labor that needs to be done for when life was actually difficult, when you had to grow it, you had to build it, you had to maintain it all on your own, and resources weren't delivered to you or in a big warehouse or a department store. Now things are really easy, and men have lost their value because they are meant to provide and support, and you can see it in men's faces when they stay active. I've met plenty of older men that retire, and they just don't retire because they continue to work. If they don't have a purpose, or if they're not providing or doing something or moving forward in a healthy manner, they get depressed, they retract, they don't know what to do themselves. They run into all sorts of problems because they don't have any meaning or purpose anymore. The work is what gives men value. And then with everything at ease of life, and they've seen other people excelling, and they're told that they need to be more like that, and they need to communicate at a higher level. There's just no way for some men to get there. And then which I'm just saying that when men are doing this, it's for a reason, that they're built different, they're wired different, and we need to appreciate that and not make fun of them, because actually making fun of them or depicting them as not valuable, or that they can't show emotions, they can't do anything like a woman can, demeans them, and then pushes them in a further direction. They start rebelling and doing things that they normally wouldn't do because they don't have any purpose anymore. Therefore, their mind drifts away, and they have to do something to get people's attention and feel loved. And they tend to do stuff that's not very smart sometimes, but it's just, yeah, we teach them this from a very early age. We need to get them involved in thinking at a higher level, because we're in the greatest nation of information that we've ever seen. We've never seen this kind of information ever, and we need to keep men informed and make sure that they pay attention to what's actually going on. So it's hard for them to do it, and then we also have to give them a little bit more time, space, and grace to actually catch up on these things, and actually give them the desire to start learning these things, because men are falling behind and they're depressed, and things are starting to fall apart with relationships and with finances and with education and also leadership. There's just no leadership from men anymore, because a lot of them don't have any purpose. They let other men lead, and they let other people with finances lead, whether it's family or it's the woman that's making more than them. They give up. They kind of just settle into this fourth place, last place kind of ordeal, and they don't really think that it's their job anymore to compete, because there's just so much more to compete on, and they only worry about themselves. They're worried about just placing somewhere else or feeling love while watching the game, drinking, playing video games, and their social time. They just don't really value work anymore, because work doesn't value them and doesn't appreciate them. When they go in there, it's usually a little bit longer for men to pick up on it, but when they do, they are more passionate. It's just they need to be given a chance, and they need to find opportunities to excel, and also they need to be loved and appreciated in their relationships, and be told that they are valuable, even though we live in autocorrect society. We live in a Word document society that says that you have to have a 4.0 and you have to excel at everything. We're very good at pointing out their flaws, but the men have been providing and protecting for generations and generations. So there's huge history of what things that they've done right. We've done a lot of things right, and this is the first time ever that they don't really know what to do, or that it's very easy to pick out someone's flaws and tell them that. So we're communicating by telling each other's flaws, because we're editing everything, we're making everything perfect, and we have all these systems that make sure that everything's perfect. And then we also start to talk like that. We start to talk like machines. Hey, there's an error. Hey, there's a mistake in this. Fix it, fix it, fix it. And we've become obsessed with perfection. We've become obsessed with just doing more and like filling up our schedules. We see all the gaps in our life, and we see all the human error, and we're just like, hey, we need to put an artificial intelligent machine in here, or an app or something that actually can manage this more effectively than a man can or a woman can. So, and we are terrified because we can't keep up with the machine. So there's all these other artificial intelligence, and then there's women that are excelling in these things are obviously better than men a lot of times. And when something takes your place and you cannot beat it, you give up and you start to look at something else to do, and there's not a lot of things that aren't run by machines. So then it just goes into despair and depression and rebellion, and that all the things that, and just they're afraid to love or give effort or passion again, because there's just nothing you can do, because you've tried and you failed, and you've tried for years and years and years. And if you've been working in the work environment for over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and then you're told you're worthless, obviously there's going to be you're going to be very depressed. You're going to like, what happened to my life? And I still have to live for the next 40 years, 50 years, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to express myself or grow, because I mean, there's these systems, and the way society is actually making men to look that they're too aggressive, or they're too this, or they're abusive, and they don't listen, and like all that is just because they're wired a little bit different. And then also it's got to the extreme just because they're overwhelmed. They can't process everything that's going on. So that we have to be patient with people. We're just not patient anymore. We're in an instant society where we think that our relationships, or the spouses, or in our job, we think that our employees are going to be perfect, and they're just bombarded with all these expectations and raising the bar, when really they just are trying to be themselves and be comfortable in their circumstances, but they're always told that they're not good enough, or their paycheck doesn't reflect that they're good enough, or all the new accounts that they have, or the house and the mortgage and all the cell phone bills and instant food and paying for food instead of making